I just want to kiss off on trade here because Missouri is the 7th largest producer of soybeans in the country. You also have exposure to dairy as well as beef is really important to your economy. What do you need to see accomplished at the G7?
Well, I think that the president needs to continue to press hard to be able to get some fairness into the negotiations to make sure that we level the playing field. As you mentioned, we have a problem with dairy. There's also a problem with our pork sales to Canada. I know in his discussions with China, they put on the table additional purchases of soybeans and corn. So I think this is all going to play out over a series of months here, over the next several months, and it's going to be a 2 steps forward, 1 step backward process. There's going to be good days and not so good days. But I think at the end of this, the president's goal is to level the playing field so that our products, our services, our commodities are able to be sold on a level playing field with the rest of the countries that we're dealing with,
sure,
and to help our producers be able to compete. And so that's what's going on. And I think that sometimes, in Canada in particular, I know that I saw Prime Minister Trudeau the other day on TV, sort of, pontificating sort of piously about some of the steel tariffs, but he didn't want to talk about the dairy tariffs. He didn't want to talk about the lumber problems we have and the pork problems. He was very selective in his comments. So people have to understand that while they are our friends, they have not been quite as friendly when it comes to trade.
Sure, and just one last question on this, though. When you have Mexico then imposing, say, a 25% tariff on some cheese, and then you have a potential 20% tariff on pork, that is going to affect your constituents. Have you been having any pushback from them on being more conciliatory so we don't get those kind of tariffs?
Well, there's some concern, but let's be honest here. President Trump is a business guy, and he's been negotiating deals like this at the upper levels with leaders of the world for a long, long time, and very successfully. He understands that there is a process. I'm not sure I agree with his process, but his process is very effective for himself and his companies over the last several years, and he's using that same process to negotiate these same things. And my people back home, they're concerned, but they understand the long-range goal is what they want to achieve as well. They understand that there may be some short-term volatility, there may be some short-term pain, but long-term gain is what they see. They see a level playing field and putting in place the fundamentals so that long-term they're going to be much better off. And quite frankly, they are all supporting the president. I have had little pushback from the standpoint of the producers themselves or even the associations themselves. They just say, let's watch what's going on, but we like what the president's doing because we haven't been playing on a level playing field.
So let's move to your role in the House Financial Services Committee. What is the final shape of 2 reforms that were proposed in early April as investors really want to look for clarity on the binding restraints of capital for the largest banks? Sort of what counts as capital? How much capital do they have to hold? Where are those reforms right now?
Well, obviously, we're still working on that. I've written a letter to the Treasury Department and some of the regulators with regards to the supplemental leverage ratio, and we're trying to make sure that there's adequate capital as well as the freedom and flexibility for the banks to be able to do their job, which is invest in the communities by manipulating their balance sheets to be able to maximize their ability to do that. And so we've got a bill that we passed, and we'll see how far it gets, but it's something that we need to continue to watch for because I understand there's a difference of opinion with regards to capital versus liquidity, but I think there's no reason you can't have a well-capitalized bank as well as a very liquid bank to be able to do that job. And it's a matter of where you draw that line. So we're working on it, and I think I really like the comptroller and the Fed's approach on this. I think they're willing to look at it and have some, get some comments back, and I think we're going to come up with something really good.
Congress recently just passed something that pushed the SIFI threshold to $250 billion, yet you had a bill that would have changed it to an activities-based threshold that would have hurt banks like a PNC, U.S. Bank, and Capital One. They want to see that actually transpire. Do you anticipate pushing this forward this year?
No, probably not. I think that, it's a situation where around this place, you kind of raise the bar, set a new threshold, and then you try and raise the bar again the next session. We've got the bar about as far as we can go this session, and I think that next session we will try something. This particular approach, I think, is quite proper. The Federal Reserve already does this. They have what they call a systemically important financial institution score, where they actually go in and look at the risk of these financial institutions based on 5 separate criteria. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're not coming up with something we're pulling out of the air. This is already a process that's in place, that's recognized also by the folks that do the global SIFIs. So to apply that to our own banks only makes common sense, to find out which ones are systemically important, systemically risky, and which ones aren't. And by the same token, if you look at the Federal Reserve scores, it's very obvious which ones are the risky ones and which ones, by their scoring, are not problem shops. And so the 4 banks you mentioned, they fall in a category that is not a problem. And so I think at some point we'll get this resolved, but it's a good step forward with what was in the Senate bill 2155 that we passed, and we're looking forward to hopefully moving that issue again next year.